Belinda, welcome to the Power Within You podcast. It's really lovely to have you here today with me. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm thank you so much for having me. I feel quite privileged to be on this podcast with you today.
Oh no, it's my complete pleasure. I know that we had a chance to chat a few weeks ago, and so I just learned so much from you just speaking to you for a few minutes. And I really can't wait for the listeners to kind of listen to you about your journey and what you can advise as well. So yes, thank you so much for joining me today. So let's kick off with my first question, which I always ask is, where did your mental health journey begin, do you feel?
So I've been thinking about this for some time. So as part of my kind of therapy journey, kind of going through therapy and then retraining as a therapist as well. And I guess in terms of where it began, I think in hindsight, I feel like it's something that I probably always struggled with, maybe kind of my earliest memories, childhood and adolescence. Listeners probably can't see what I look like, so I am a South Asian female. My accent has changed now over the years, but I grew up in Yorkshire, and the primary school that I went to, I was the first person of colour to attend. So
wow.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah.
I love the Yorkshire accent, by the way, as well. Like it's a beautiful accent too. And it's a certain twang. Is it kind of when you're angry or upset, or is it just faded out?
Yeah, definitely that. My partner knows that when it starts to come out, he needs to run away quickly. Yeah. And usually if I'm around somebody from the north as well, it does come out quite strongly.
Oh, lovely. Beautiful. So yes, you were saying about being the only person of colour in school as well.
Yeah. So definitely the experience kind of in and of itself, although I could have stopped at South Asian female and maybe that would have been enough for you. That's where
we're so complex as human beings, do you know what I mean? Like there's so much to us. There's so much depth, I think, you know.
Yeah.
And how was that for you to be, you know, the only person of colour at school back then?
Well, it was my first taste of kind of racism at 4 years old, being called a Paki and not knowing what on earth that meant. So kind of going home thinking, this doesn't feel right, but I also don't really know what it means. It just feels really unwelcoming. So that definitely was an experience, and that was the start of that kind of journey. But secondly, the other thing is kind of going home then after school to that stereotypical strict Asian household. I'm sure you've got experience of that as well.
100%. Like you couldn't really explain. I don't think I ever told my parents I was getting bullied at school as well, but I don't think I ever told my parents what was going on because we didn't really share our emotions. We just came home and just rocked on with stuff, right? So you're always like just holding it in, aren't you?
Exactly that. I mean, you said emotions there, feelings. What is that? I have no idea what that is at that age. It's just not something that you talk about. I don't remember a time ever being asked, how are you? How are you feeling? That just was never a conversation that we ever had.
And I'm sure that causes, I mean, you know, it must cause, that suppression of emotion must cause so many issues. I mean, when I've been doing the MSc that I'm doing mental health, like they were saying that, you know, 85% of mental health issues occur before the age 18. It just manifests a bit later, basically, as well, because as a child you might act out differently, but as an adult then it starts hitting you, doesn't it, I suppose? Yeah,
absolutely. I think it definitely affects you as a child, but then going into adulthood as well, something that I see that's really common is, and I experienced this myself, is that inability to emotionally regulate. Not really knowing what to do with these strong feelings. Like, what do I do with them? No one's ever told me what I should do. How do I acknowledge them? Like, I'm just not sure what to do with them. So I do remember my first experience of therapy in my early 20s, and my therapist would keep asking me, how do I feel? And I would keep saying, I don't know. I don't know. How do I answer this question?
No, it's so hard because, like, if you've never talked about your feelings, where do you start, right?
Yeah.
Can I ask what type of therapy you first had in your 20s? Like, was it a type of therapy that you had, or was it, you know, what was it like for you, your first experience?
My first experience, well, I've had many therapists after that, so I didn't go back to the first one.
That's a pattern, though, isn't it? Generally, like, sometimes we need to find the right one for us.
Yes, exactly. And that's okay. I think that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay to do that. It might take 3, 4, maybe 6 times to find the right one for you. I don't know what kind of therapy he did. Do you know what? It was a conversation that I had with a friend, and we were catching up just as we generally do for a dinner. And she said to me, oh, I've started to see a therapist. It was the first time that it was ever talked about kind of in friendship groups. Maybe, yeah, it was around therapy, but it wasn't something that you went and did. So, and this was another, a friend of mine who was also that South Asian. I was like, oh, wow, she's going to therapy. Like, this seemed like such a big thing. Mm-hmm. And I kind of sat on it for a couple of weeks thinking, she said it's really helpful. Maybe I should give this a go. And then I just kind of bit the bullet and asked her for his details, and that was it. There was no research. There was no thought behind it other than, oh, okay, that's a therapist, and aren't they all the same? So that was my first experience, which is definitely not been the case kind of as the years have gone by.
No, absolutely. And so, going from, childhood and suffering from racism at 4 years old, and then moving on to therapy in your 20s, like what led up to therapy, I suppose, for them?
Yeah, I think it's going back to that strict Asian household where, might seem a little bit long-winded, but like essentially freedom was this thing that you could not attain. It was only attainable once you got married. You could only travel once you were married. You can cut your hair once. Anything can be done only once you're married.
Yes.
And it was just like, but then getting to that married part seemed incredibly impossible because you couldn't possibly be seen talking to the opposite sex. No, God, no. What would the neighbours say? The community, what was the auntie down the road going to say to you? So, and the other thing is that's the only option as well. So in terms of once you're of that marriageable age, so anytime between the age of 18 and 27, because God forbid you get married any later than that. And then you've got all these other certain stipulations, they have to be of this religion, caste gets involved. This awful notion of kind of caste, and they can only be of the opposite sex. The list just goes on and on and on. And then there's the other thing, whereas I have a much younger brother. So there's 3 girls, 1 boy. And he's being treated so differently.
Absolutely. Is that the Indian male privilege that, that we see in Asian families? And they're treated like royalty. They're put on a pedestal and they can do what they want. Whereas when we're cleaning the bathrooms and the house and stuff, and they're just dusting about, it's really quite annoying and very upsetting.
Oh, absolutely. It's so unfair. I just remember thinking, how unfair is this? It's not fair. And then on the other hand, it's unfair, but it's also the norm. As well in the culture. So it's almost like you can't win this battle. So for me, I really felt like getting into a university, and more importantly, getting into a university that was far enough that I could live outside of home. That became my main goal. So I kind of worked towards that. Fast forward, I got there thinking, yes, week leading up to it, packing all my stuff, get to university, it didn't quite work out as I planned. So I just became, we had a freshers fortnight, so we're looking to have 2 weeks. So I had 2 weeks of freedom, and then boom. I just became incredibly ill, incredibly quickly, and then found myself stuck in a hospital bed, in and out for 1.5 years. And I just thought, this is not how it was supposed to be.
And so was that literally as soon as you left? Because I know that it happens with a lot of young Asian women who are raised in very strict families. They go to university and there's freedom, but they don't know what to do with it, what it means, and you're separated from your family, you're never allowed out, never allowed to socialise. Like, what was it? Is it like literally? Was it like just going there and it being overwhelmed by the environment that you're in?
So it wasn't. I wasn't kind of mentally ill. I became really badly physically ill. So I had lots of kidney problems. So I have no idea. Still to this day, I have no idea what happened there. The doctors weren't quite able to figure it out. So. But then that did massively impact my mental health. And I think it's always, as I said before, it's always been there, that low mood, depression, anxiety, but this just kind of catapulted it to like an all-time kind of rock bottom.
Yeah.
It was a wake-up call I kind of needed as well, though. I was outside of the restrictive home, was ready for freedom, and it was all taken away.
Yeah.
And this time there's nothing to blame. I can't blame the culture. I can't blame the parents. I can't blame anything. It's just, I'm just stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. And so did you stay on at university, or were you having to go back home and be looked after by parents and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I was pretty much in hospital for chunks of time. So when I did leave, I went back maybe a couple of days, maybe a week, and then back again. So I never really experienced that freedom that I'd been searching for, those 19 years. And that's what just really got to me. I just thought, oh, what is life? This is not life. And I did experience those really kind of dark, intrusive thoughts, that suicide ideation. I just thought, this isn't how it's supposed to be. And it was that kind of bringing that into my awareness. And I think that's two things. It's firstly kind of being aware of what it is that I'm feeling, what it was that I was feeling. So incredibly low, so anxious. The social anxiety was unreal. Those kind that everybody's thinking about me, nobody's thinking about you. But it was just felt so incredibly overwhelming. It didn't feel like there was a point to being alive anymore.
Sorry to hear that. That's just awful.
Yeah, it really, really was. But I didn't want to feel like that anymore. And that was the bit that I needed, that push that I needed. That it came into my awareness, so I was aware of it. But then secondly, and I think most importantly, I wanted to do something about it. I wanted it to change. Yeah,
and that's the key, isn't it? Like when it doesn't change, then you continue to be in that cycle as well. But when you make that awareness, the self-awareness of your thoughts, your emotions, and you start to change it, then you push yourself forwards, and that is amazing. That's key, isn't it? Really. So this is enough's enough, especially if you're in such a dark place, taking yourself out of it. But how did you manage that? I mean, that resilience is amazing. Like, what got you out of thinking, that's it, enough's enough, I'm going to do something about this?
Honestly, I don't know. I wish I could tell you that there's this magic pill that I could give you, or a magic wand that I can wave and think, and yes, suddenly you'll be, right, I'm ready to kind of start this journey. I think for me, it was really just enough's enough. I felt so incredibly lonely as well. I think that was the other thing. And there were people around me, but it still felt incredibly lonely. Like nobody could possibly understand what I'm going through. And I think that's something that's quite common. But then so many people are saying the same thing. So we couldn't possibly be alone in that journey as well. And it just got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. So something had to change. And that was that push that I needed. So when I got out, I became incredibly driven. I didn't seek support at that point, though. Right. That came, as I said, in my early 20s. So it took a few more years to, get to that point of, therapy is something that I can do. So in the meantime, it was just addressing my thoughts and trying to be a little bit more positive, trying to find the positive out of life.
Without therapy, because I remember going to books and things like that and reading stuff. What did you find that was helpful for you before having therapy to kind of get yourself driven and about managing your thoughts?
I think books as well. I remember my uncle actually gave me a book. It was on my 18th birthday, but I didn't read it.
As you do, just put the bookshelf down.
But it just kind of, I was like, oh yeah, that's there. All right, I'll give that a bit of a read. I've got nothing better to do. And it was Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth.
One of my favourite books, man.
Yeah.
One of my favourite books. Yeah, I refer to that all the time. I wish I got that when I was 18, but you know what? I wouldn't have read it either when I was 18.
Exactly.
It would have taken me to 40 years old to read that, probably. And so it is the most, I'm so glad you said that. It's beautiful. The way he explains it is stunning. The way we think about things and how people around us react to us. And, again, he talks about self-awareness a lot. So did you start reading that years later, the New Earth?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I don't know how many years later, but several years later. It was still in perfect condition when I picked it up. So no, it just opened my eyes to a different way of thinking about life that I had not experienced before. And that kind of took me on a different journey where I was more open to things like therapy and just giving it a go, because it can't hurt, right? I'm already in a dark place, so it could only get better. from here.
Absolutely. And actually, you know, that there is research that shows that your stress internally does manifest in physical illness as well. And it sounds like you were having those physical symptoms first and then dealing with the mental, you know, pain that you're going through as well to try and fix it. So did your physical health get better as well as you're working on things? Like, did you see a difference?
Yeah, I did. I think, yes, but I don't know. I think it's maybe a combination of a couple of things. I definitely think there's a link between our mental and our physical health. Absolutely. But I also was generally being more positive. So I would seek out things that would help me as well. So I would look to eat things that nourished my body. I would make sure I got enough sleep. I would make sure that I moved my body in a way that felt good to me. So I think it's a combination of both of those things.
Absolutely. No, I think you're absolutely right. And so, you know, like thinking about all these things, you know, did you see any red flags at the time?
At the time. So this is a question that I get quite stuck on. I've asked myself this a few times. And I found it really, really difficult to answer. I can answer it in hindsight. Oh, looking back, yes, loads of red flags. But kind of putting myself back there, going back in time, everything just feels so big and heavy. And a lot of people describe it as walking around with this grey cloud hanging around you. But for me, it's also that, but then fog. So I can't actually see through the fog. So mentally, I just couldn't see a way, like there's no flags there for me to see.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's just so difficult. And I think a lot of people, if you're struggling with answering that question, it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's so true because you don't really know. Like you said, in hindsight, it's easier to do. But when you're in it, feeling the low moods and that sort of stuff, you're just in the low moods. You haven't got the space to think about other things, right? This is a red flag. This is what I should be doing, right? Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. And so the combinations that you went to, you know, you became driven, you know, doing your own sort of research, doing your own reading, went to therapy and that sort of stuff. So therapy obviously is a great support. And as Asian women, we don't really talk to anyone else, do we? About our feelings, our emotions, you know, like certainly shame and stigma around mental health issues in our community.
Yes.
As well. Were you able to, did you have a support network around you that you could go to, or was it quite a lonely experience?
Oh, again, it's. I think at the time I had a really good group of friends. I still do. I've got my tribe now as well. I'm very lucky to have. But it's that. I think you mentioned that word there, the S word, shame, but also the other S word, stigma.
Yes.
And I feel like the two kind of tend to go hand in hand. And it's that I did really feel this real sense of shame at the time, and I just want to highlight the difference between like guilt and shame.
Please do.
So guilt is that sense of I did something bad, and then shame is I am bad. So it was that I am bad feeling, and living and growing up with that feeling of not being enough. And I think again that's also something perhaps related to the household that I grew up in, that South Asian immigrant household. You're never going to be good enough. You're always trying to be better and better and better. It's really, really tough. That kind of sense of I am bad, not being good enough, taking up too much space, maybe had this thing of feeling stupid as well because I can't be good enough. So I can't possibly share this with somebody because that's just going to increase the level of shame that I'm feeling. So I can only describe it as this veil of shame around me. So I describe that fog and then cover that with a veil of shame. There's no way I'm going to get out of that.
That sounds bloody awful, to be fair. Like, yeah, that's the thing. Like how, like, it's almost like sometimes you do need that help. Some people go for therapy, they go for medication as well, you know, depending on how they're feeling. And when you said that you had your first amount of therapy, you just got a recommendation and then you kind of went for it. Thereafter, you know, I know that you mentioned that that was the first therapist that you saw. How did you navigate your journey to that point onwards from your early 20s?
The first thing I want to say, it's been a journey.
It's been a journey.
It's been a journey.
Yeah.
And it's going to be different for everybody. My journey may look very different to yours or somebody else's. But it did take, a long while to find the right support. And again, that first therapist, great that I had a first kind of experience of therapy. Looking back, probably not the best therapist for me Maybe it would have been great for somebody else, but it wasn't great for me. So recognizing that that's not what all therapists are like, and that's not what all therapy is like.
Yes.
And then wanting again to do something about it. So back to the beginning, firstly, acknowledging that something wasn't right. So developing that self-awareness. And then secondly, realizing again, I want something to change. And the only way that I can get that is to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then so did you manage to find your therapist in the end that you were able to connect with? And what kind of what was kind of having this person fits? Like, what was that feeling like?
Oh, it's funny because this therapist actually asked me that same question.
Oh, really? No way. No pressure.
I don't know. The felt sense of she just got me. I felt like I could trust her, but also she wasn't just sitting there listening and not really doing much. She was able to challenge me, but I was also able to take on that challenge. So I think it's, again, that combination of finding the right therapist for me, which took trial and error, but also being in the right place to accept that kind of therapy as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so, because we know there's different types of therapy out there, and I guess it suits, CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy, then you get psychoanalysis therapy, and that's got a few ranges of therapy as well, isn't it? How would one sort of discover or understand what's right for them, do you think? Like, what's the best way to go through it? Or is it just go through a few therapists, see what happens?
I guess it depends on how much you know about different modalities. I mean, I think I heard there's over 400 different modalities out there. So that'll take you a long time to get through all of those.
That's nuts.
Crazy. But if you're kind of completely new to therapy, doing a little bit of research, going on to the BACP, so the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, they've got some great articles on there on different types of therapy. Is there something that kind of sings out to you that they feel like would align with what you're looking for? If you're just not quite sure, or there's a few that come out, maybe looking at an integrative therapist, so they can combine a few different approaches. And again, that's going to be trial and error. So you might find, okay, this modality is great for me, but then the therapist isn't right for you.
Yes, exactly.
So again, a bit of trial and error of trying to find the right one. But I would say, again, it's a process and a journey. So if you find that one isn't working for you, please don't give up. Try another one.
Yes, absolutely. You have to hang in there, don't you? Especially if you're going through something. The person's out there for you. I think the person is there, wanting to help you, and that we should find that right person. Amazing. So, you found the right therapist for you, and how have you kind of have you broken any sort of particular cycles or your brain, like for feeling so low so many years ago to now? Like, what were the kind of, how have you broken that?
Oh, breaking cycles. So I think, having done quite a lot of work on this, I don't feel like it's a cycle just in itself in me. It feels more like a generational cycle. And I do feel like that's probably the case for many immigrant families, the children of immigrants, like whatever generation you are. So again, becoming aware that maybe it's not just me, maybe there's a pattern there. Yeah. And then doing that work. So what is that pattern? What is it that I've been experiencing? Did my parents, did my uncles, did my grandparents, did they kind of experience this? And the more kind of you talk about it, the more you realize that actually it's not just me. Maybe this has been passed down. That's what it feels like.
It's like almost a sense of like trauma being passed down, right, through generations as well. And also I think that trauma can come from partition as well, especially Asian families as well. Having like the biggest immigration ever to happen in the sort of history of mankind, for that to happen. And also, for some reason, I just don't know why India can be so forward thinking in so many ways, but so backwards in so many ways as well. And I think it is that male patriarchy that's in place, that's always been in place, the caste system, and that's embedded in our families, isn't it? I guess it takes for our generations to have to either we don't deal with it and we just carry on with the cycle, or we take a step back and go, we're in a really bad place ourselves. how do we break that cycle for our future generations and get the word out there, I think. I don't think we do that enough, but that's why I'm so excited to speak to you, because, you know, there aren't many Asian people who want to speak about their mental health issues, right? Or their journeys, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if you found the same thing, but, you know.
Yeah. I mean, when I was looking for a therapist, it's very difficult to find a South Asian therapist.
That's what I'm saying. And the other thing is, for me, I was like, do I want a South Asian therapist? You know,
what was it?
Am I going to get judged
about that question? Okay.
Am I going to get judged, you know, for being who I am? You know, and I thought that was a really scary thing. And so I kind of avoided South Asian therapists as well, because I was like, I don't know. Am I going to think that like my mother? Am I going to project onto them? Am I going to do all, you know? So I think that was the other scary part for me. You know, I don't know if that's a common thing, but like, you know, but I don't think there's any South Asian therapists out there. There's you and maybe a couple others that I know of, but not really that many.
No, and that's so interesting that you said that fear of being judged if you did have a South Asian therapist. And I've got quite a lot of clients who come from a South Asian background specifically because they want somebody who understands, who just gets it. I don't have to explain everything; you just get it.
Yes.
But I do wonder whether, well, I'm sure there are now. I've spoken to others who don't want to for that fear of judgment. And as therapists, we're trained to be non-judgmental, to be empathetic, but
exactly,
you can't help it because we're all human.
Yeah, indeed, and that we don't know what's going to come to us as we you know, see a therapist and that sort of stuff as well. Do you see, obviously, you know, we can't speak about clients and that sort of stuff as well, but is there any particular patterns that South Asian women have or should be aware of, or, you know, particularly with our community? Is there anything you see with us that perhaps it could be a red flag as well, you know, or something that we need to kind of start dealing with? What is it that, how does sort of, what the issues that manifesting do you feel are seeing?
Yeah, so just being really general, I wouldn't say there's anything that you need to work on. I try and stay away from that word need or should.
Yes.
It just can feel a bit draining. But I think what you just mentioned there earlier about those cycles, that kind of cycle of generational trauma, definitely it's going to come up.
Yeah.
From what you said there, partition, but also just being a daughter or a son or a child of an immigrant in itself. There's so much to unpack there. So recognizing those patterns, investigating that and healing those kinds of wounds. And that's really, really tough, particularly because recognizing if you're the first person who's gone to therapy in your family, recognizing that even if you change, the rest of your family might not.
Absolutely. And you can't control them or change them. You can only change yourself, right, as well.
Exactly.
I do wonder though, like my dad's 83, mum's 79, 80 next year. I do wonder, without, God knows what that generation went through, like in terms of their main mental health. Because obviously depression hasn't just existed for us, it's been there for time, you know, and all those things. But it's, I just don't know, it must have been, I mean, not having the space, opportunity to discuss these things must have been so detrimental to them and to their kids, basically, as well, you know. And I hope that more older South Asian women are able to get into therapy as well to deal with any stuff that's, you know, kind of come their way as well. But, you know, like, what would you tell your younger self about what you know now? Like, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, keep on holding on. And that you're stronger than you think. There's a reason for your experiences. They're going to make you the person that you are destined to be. They're going to give you that greater level of empathy to help others then who may be struggling through life. Yeah,
absolutely. Empathy is key, isn't it, as well? Like, it's such an important thing to have, and self-compassion for yourself.
Yes.
Right? That self-care is missing from so many women. We care about, again, going back to South Asian women, like, care about other people. You can give a shit about yourself. It's all good. You know, you're just like, whatever, like it's all fine. We'll just look after you. And it's innate for some reason, isn't it, as well? That's those caretaking abilities, which are a good thing and also a detrimental thing to you as well, to be fair. Very good. And so, like, you know, looking back at your own mental health journey yourself, were there any sort of particular misunderstandings that you had about, you know, what you were going through? And, you know, did you, I guess, like you said, it's been a journey, but what were the kind of main things that you weren't clicking with, or that you do more research on, for example?
Oh, so I guess like a couple of the biggest things. First thing comes to mind is that I had to do it alone.
Yes.
Because it didn't feel nobody else is going to save you, is that voice that we get as we're growing up. You know, just get on with it. Just get on with it. That was probably the biggest one. And then the second one is the idea that I was broken, so I needed to be fixed. And I don't think anybody is broken.
Oh, man. Yeah. No, of course they're not. And that's the thing, isn't it? Like, there's something wrong with me. What is it that's wrong with me? I'm not normal. You know, other people are fine. Look at them around us, you know? Absolutely.
Yeah. And on the face of it, I probably was walking around thinking, like, people thinking, oh my gosh, she's got a great life. Everything's kind of, but inside it's just so incredibly lonely.
Do you know what though? You are so inspirational, like considering, you know, the things that you've had to go through, your journey as well, and then smashing it in your career, you know, like just being able to like go from A to B and then like just flying, like, you know, it's so amazing. I love hearing stories like this. What keeps you going? Like, what is it that drives you?
Oh, I think what you just asked me there a little bit earlier is that I now have the ability and the passion and the want to help others. So why would I not do that? I don't want anyone to feel the way that I have felt in the past. And if you're feeling that way, then let me help you on that journey. I'm not going to fix you because there's nothing to be fixed.
Yes.
But let me walk alongside you. Let's
That's
see what
really
we can
wonderful.
do together.
Absolutely. And I always you know, ask this question to all my guests, and that is, how do you find the power within you to manage your mental health now and safeguard it for the future? Like, what things are you going to continue with now and forever, I suppose?
Okay, so I guess a few things that I can kind of talk about here. That something more recently actually that's been really helpful. I used to have an evening routine, but I never really had a morning routine. I'm not a morning person. Do not talk to me in the morning. That's when the Yorkshire comes out. You start to talk to me in the morning. But having a morning routine, something to set me up from the day, and it's just two small things that I do because honestly, I do not have the energy for anything more than that. And that's affirmations and a short meditation.
Lovely, really lovely. And how do affirmations help, do you think, people or yourself?
Yeah, do you know, I used to be really skeptical of them. I was like, what do you mean? I'm not going to... And I had this idea of this picture in my head of me talking to myself in the bathroom mirror. And it's just ludicrous. I'm not doing that. Who does that? But actually, I don't talk to myself in the mirror, but I just kind of say it to myself. And it has made a massive difference in terms of my thinking and reducing those kind of negative thoughts. Allowing me to be more aware of my thought patterns and feelings throughout the day as well. So, for example, one of my affirmations this morning was, I think only positive thoughts, no matter the external external conditions are. So, I mean, that's pretty difficult to adhere to. There's going to be stuff that annoy you. That's okay. But knowing that that's my affirmation and my intention for the day ahead, I just felt a lot less affected by things that I would normally associate with being negative.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it just sets me up for the day.
And do you have to do affirmations on a regular basis for them to kind of set into your subconscious? Is that the kind of thing that you need to do to kind of start believing it, I suppose?
Do you know, I don't know if I'm ever going to really believe it 100%. I'm going to be really honest. But it helps me throughout the day. So day by day, it does help. I think all of these little practices that we do. So I also do mindfulness in the evening. I do a bit of gratitude as well. It does help if you practice them. So the more that you do them, the more benefit you're going to get out of them. But then saying that we're all human, I don't do it every day because I forget, because I look and I think I can't be bothered. You know, that's okay too. So I think you mentioned about self-compassion there, and that's another kind of key thing. Being kinder to myself. It's not always going to happen, but I'm going to hope that it happens. So if it does, let me celebrate that small win. And if it doesn't, that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I love doing gratitude as well. And I don't do it every day, but if I'm going through something, that I try to sort of lock into the gratitude. But I also put my hand on my chest. I can really feel it when I'm doing the gratitude. I don't know, it just feels so comforting, but also like so real as well, if that makes sense. You know, like, yeah, it does. And I think people go, oh, that's a bit cheesy, whatever. Like, but it's actually really helps. Give it a go. Yeah. Affirmations, gratitude, journaling, I think has helped lots of people before. I know that parts of therapy, you get homework sometimes, CBT to do.
Yeah.
You know?
I would be a bit cautious about journaling. For some people, it really helps. If you're, I know for me in the past, when I was feeling really kind of in that dark cloud, writing things down just made me stay in there a little bit longer.
Interesting.
And just ruminate over it. So that's
really interesting. Yeah. So how would you know if journaling helps or not? Is it just doesn't help? It just seems not a shift.
How do you feel after
right?
that? Yeah.
Right.
The question I tend to say to my clients is, how is this helping you? If it's not, why are you doing it? Is there something that you could do that's a little bit more positive, a little bit more balanced?
Absolutely. And so do you feel like, you know, looking over the next sort of 5-10 years, you know, do you feel like you're implementing these really beautiful routines into your daily life? Like, do you feel like do you think it'll get better as you get older?
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah.
Do you know, I try not to think about that, because if I'm thinking about the future, I'm not living here right now.
Love it.
Right now, it's helping me. So let's go with that.
Absolutely. Then that is Eckhart Tolle, right? The power of now as well. Like, be in the present. Don't think about it, because that will just, you know, create the future for you anyway, naturally, for sure. Amazing. So tell me, if people wanted to get in touch with you and talk about what you do and that sort of stuff, how could they what's the best way to get in touch with you?
You can head over to LinkedIn. So search for me on there. Any questions, anything you want to chat about, well-being, mental health, please feel free to reach out. So it's Belinda Sidhu, Sidhu, or my website, www.bewellconsultancy.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your inspirational, wonderful insights. I know that there'll be so many people who are benefiting from your experience in just listening to this podcast. So please get in touch with Belinda if you want to talk more to her about, you know, her services and that sort of stuff as well. So, but in the meantime, thank you, Belinda, for joining me on the Power of the New podcast.
Great. No, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.